विश्व में हमने युवाओं की आईटी एनर्जी के माध्यम से अपना एक रुतबा खड़ा किया है और भारत इसके बात के लिए गर्व कर सकता है। दुनिया में हम आंख में आंख मिला करके बात कर सकते हैं। और ये मेरा साफ मैं हमेशा कहता आया हूं, आईटी प्लस आईटी इज इक्वल टू आईटी। इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी प्लस इंडियन टैलेंट इज इक्वल टू इंडिया टुमारो।
Hi, very good morning. सभी को नमस्कार. A warm welcome to the second day of 20th World Education Summit Higher Education, and here we are with one more important and most vital topic of this current higher education system, that is how technology is impacting higher education in India. For this session, I would like to invite the speakers to discuss and deliberate on this topic. First of all, I would like to welcome Professor Dr. T.G.Sitharam, Director, Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Guwahati. Sitharam sir, namaskar. Thank you for joining us at World Education Summit. I would like to welcome Dr. Yajulu Medury, Vice Chancellor, Mahindra University from Hyderabad. Thank you, Dr. Yajulu sir. Thank you very much for giving your precious time to us. I would like to welcome Dr. Nikhil Agarwal, CEO, IIT Kanpur Foundation for Innovation and Research in Science and Technology, Startup and Incubation, Kanpur. Dr. Nikhil sir, thank you very much for giving your precious time to us to the World Education Summit. I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Vice Chancellor, World University of Design, Sonipat. Thank you, Sanjay man. Thank you, Sanjay sir. Thank you very much for joining us for the World Education Summit. I would like to welcome Professor Dr. J. Sodhi, Group CIO and Senior Vice President, Amity Education Group. Thank you, Sodhi sir. Thank you very much for joining us at World Education Summit. I would like to welcome Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, Pro-Chancellor, Symbiosis International Deemed University and Principal Director, Symbiosis, Pune. Thank you, Dr. Vidya ma'am. Thank you for giving your precious time to World Education Summit. And I would like to welcome the speaker and the moderator of this session, Mr. Sudhakar Rao, Director, Branding, ICFAI Group. Thank you, Sudhakar sir. It will always be a pleasure to have you at World Education Summit. So I would like to request all my audience, as the topic is most important and currently needed. So if you have any question in your mind, please be free. Please put in the Q&A section. Speakers will take it live during this event. So not taking much time, I will hand over this virtual live to Sudhakar sir to take this discussion proceed, sir. Over to you, Sudhakar sir.
Very good morning to all the viewers on this World Education Summit 2021. It's my pleasure and honor to be moderating this very important panel discussion. On a morning like this, you cannot ask for something better because you have some of the finest higher education leaders on your panel, and the topic is how technology is impacting higher education towards creating opportunities for the student and the learning outcomes, and many other issues. So what we'll do is, in the next 60 minutes, we will discuss this topic to the extent possible in terms of detail, but would like to capture some of the most important changes that have taken place and some of the most important takeaways that we all in higher education will have to make note of. For quite some time, the industry has been saying that education per se is behind in terms of adopting technology. The practitioner would say that. Whereas the pandemic has created an opportunity probably to accelerate some of the adoptions, but just that is one part of it. But looking at education as a spectrum, especially with a focus on higher education, how did we adopt technology, or how technology impacted us in the past, in the present, and in future would be the broad scope of this discussion. So once again, I welcome all the distinguished members on this panel, and I would like to start off with one simple question, and that is, of course, we have to talk about the pandemic. How has this pandemic affected or changed your institution? Each of you are leading some of the best institutions in this country. And what is your outlook? So this can be an intro kind of a observation from your side. Maybe we'll take it for two to 3 minutes each one of you. How the pandemic has changed your institution and what is your outlook? I will start with Professor Sitharam.
Namaste. Very good morning to all the distinguished panel and all the viewers of this discussion. Thank you very much for inviting me. So at IIT Guwahati, many were skeptical to run the online education or using technology in engineering particularly. The sudden closure of our institution in March 2020 led to an abrupt conversion of conventional face-to-face instruction to the fully online or a blended sometimes format, because most of our students, both undergraduate and master students, have to vacate the hostels and go home. Please remember, IITs are residential schools. However, initially it was very difficult to go completely to online, but our faculty really did a tremendous job cope up with the pandemic, where physical distancing, safety, and hygiene were very critical, and also it became a new norm. So there was no option for us to left for the traditional educators at IITs to change quickly and adopt to new normal. So we have done that in the last 1.5 years. Although online education has been a new concept to educators in general, but IITs are actually not new for that, because many of you know that from last 15 years, 10 to 15 years, we were contributing, and even we were one of the creators. IIT Guwahati is one of the creators of National Program on Technology Enhanced Learning, NPTEL. Swayam courses we have also included, helped many places, online education, which is, but however, in engineering, online delivery was always, questioned, and how do we do our laboratory classes? So even in that, our colleagues had done a tremendous job. I think many of you know about it, virtual labs, an initiative of the Ministry of Education, under the National Mission on Education through ICT. This initiative was actually much before even pandemic started. So many of the laboratory courses actually are online today. Let me tell you, technology has the potential to revolutionize the traditional teaching and learning process. Definitely. It can eliminate the barriers to the education imposed by space as well as in time, and also dramatically expand access to lifelong learning. However, in spite of that, of the technology promise, its integration in India, particularly in higher education, has not been very rapid or painless. Why I say that is, even at IITs, we have to struggle 1 or 2 terms after the pandemic started. How do we evaluate the students? Or how do you conduct classes? Because 50 minutes classes are no meaning for an online education. So anyway, I will try to conclude. So the faculty-centered approach did not work, because in the earlier, faculty is the center of attraction. But here, the students are much more smarter and they are very good in using the technology than our teachers. So many professors were reluctant to adopt alternative instruction strategies in the beginning. But later on, seeing the advantages of it, we also conducted training programs, even at IIT, for all the teachers to cope up with the new tools and technologies. Now, I would like to conclude my initial remarks saying that no one knows what higher education will look in 2025 or 2100. Because now, even this pandemic goes away, we do not know. But it is certain colleges and universities will be definitely different places than they were in 2015. So that is for sure. That means technology is going to stay and be with us, and many of the learnings will change. Thank you. Namaskar.
Great, sir. The important takeaway there is that technology has a great potential of creating this access. It can democratize learning teaching experience, and you have done various initiatives like many other leading institutions in this country in terms of moving from faculty-centered approach to a student-centered approach. Thank you very much, sir, for your initial remarks. And now we will listen from Dr. Vidya, ma'am, how this pandemic has affected or changed your institution's working process, and what is your outlook there? Initial remarks, ma'am, from you.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. I think the answer would be similar to my previous colleague. But yes, it's Symbiosis, exactly what Dr. Sitharam said happened. And I think this happened in all universities, because most of our campuses are also residential campuses. So I think the safety of students when the pandemic struck us in March 2020 was of paramount importance. But later, and we were in the midst of examinations for some of the programs. And, while shifting to online teaching was a challenge, but I think the more challenge was evaluation of students through online assessments. And that was most critical. But I'm very happy that our teachers as well as our examination department, worked together and found out innovative techniques to evaluate these students. And then in Maharashtra, there was a 2 months of lockdown, a total shutdown. And we used these 2 months for capacity building. And that was like a godsend, for us, that we got these 2 months. We, kind of trained our teachers. Of course, they were well versed with using ICT, but not moving on to 100% technology or 100% use of technology. And therefore, it was a great challenge. And, using technology is not something like this that you have either you do a Zoom meeting or a webinar or on a WebEx, but you need to have different kind of pedagogies. You need to engage students. And again, that was very critical, whereas teachers were used to face-to-face, having students right there in the classrooms, looking at reactions of students while they were teaching. Here you had a screen and you wondered whether what you taught or whether the students learned. And therefore, that was the big challenge. But yes, they did adapt to the challenge. And as Dr. Sitharam said, that I must applaud all the teachers, not just of Symbiosis, but I think all across India, I would say that they've done a marvelous job to switch over and adapt to a totally new way of teaching. And I must appreciate the students as well, that while we sometimes wondered whether students were attentive, did students learn, were they really engaged? But through the assessments and evaluations, we realized that yes, they were engaged. They also took online education seriously.